Welcome to the Stumbling Spirit, contemplations on the path of resilience. Whether you realize it or not, you are resilient. It's your birthright. As you take in your next breath, know this truth. It's not only about your capacity to overcome difficult situations, but it's about your courage to do the necessary work to heal, learn, grow, and move forward. What you gain is invaluable wisdom. And it's through these hard stumbles in life that we often discover a new purpose that aligns with our spirit. My name is Fabio da Silva Fernandez, Reiki Master, Mindfulness Coach, and Mystical Explorer. Join me as the Stumbling Spirit podcast highlights the lives of extraordinary people like you, sharing transformative stories and beneficial practices of resilience to guide you on your wellness journey. Hello. It's hard to believe that season 2 of the Stumbling Spirit podcast is over. Thank you for joining me for this special retrospective to highlight key themes from this year's show. But before we dive into it, I want to share a realization I have about resilience itself. Often standard definitions of resilience talk about the ability to overcome or recover from adversity. But the reality is that there are no guarantees. So if we were to accept these definitions at face value, does it mean that anyone who doesn't overcome life's challenges isn't resilient? Absolutely not. Fundamentally, resilience is a combination of qualities and actions that support our desire to overcome unwanted circumstances, and it's the drive to keep on trying. There are certain qualities such as courage and humility that open a door for us to take an honest look within ourselves, to connect to our truth, to sense what it is we might need at any given moment, and to take the necessary steps to facilitate changes in our lives. Although there are no guarantees for overcoming any of life's problems, resilience is often a pathway to learning, transformation, and discovering our purpose. Does this mean that any action we take in response to adversity will align with being resilient? In Season 3 of the Stumbling Spirit podcast, I will explore the connection between resilience and survival and demonstrate how they overlap and differ. Now let's get back to examining the themes from this year's show in 2 parts. Identity being one of the facets of resilience, and the real and metaphorical mountains we climb. Special thanks to all of my wonderful guests who shared their personal stories and insights on cultivating resilience. Now I invite you to sit back, relax, and listen to some of the thought-provoking perspectives from this past season. Part 1. Identity. In my Season 1 retrospective, I had pointed out 6 categories of resilience, but since then, my list has expanded to more than 12, one of them being identity. In fact, if I were to rank my list in order of magnitude, I would place identity at the very top because it's something that we humans are confronted with every day, and it's unlikely to go away. We continually contemplate who we are, what we are, how we see ourselves, and how we want others to see us and treat us. Whether it's about our nationality, race, gender, sexuality, body, age, education, profession, hobby, faith, disability, illness, disease, trauma, socioeconomic status, and the list goes on and on. Our perpetual need to examine and redefine our identity is about the search for purpose. It's about establishing safety, security, truth, and realness in the face of external pressures and social barriers. Take a listen.
Like, to be honest, in Amsterdam, I am surrounded by so many successful business owners. I have so many friends who run like €1 million businesses. It's like incredible. But I see that the biggest challenge always is within. We have certain beliefs. We have certain limitations within ourselves. I always believe that the big change is to look within yourself, see where you are blocking yourself, because I really believe that energy can come through. We can channel, we can get amazing business ideas. We have the most amazing books where all the business ideas and strategies are already there. You have amazing business coaches, like whatever, everything is there. But what's really blocking us a lot of times is within ourselves. It's something where we're scared of, something that has happened to us and created a certain belief that we cannot do that, or we are not worth that. Are we really worthy enough to create a certain business or to get that promotion? Were you even thinking when you were a little kid that you were ever going to get that big promotion? Were you ever going to be that CEO or that VP? Did you ever believe you could? Because if you believe you couldn't, it's going to be tough. Unconsciously, you're going to block all the things that are coming on your path because you believe you're not worth it. And if you are open, that's why I really think that the big success comes when we work on ourselves. The big success will come in your relationship. The big success will come in your business. It will come in your job. It will even come in your health. I really believe that.
I always think that young boys in a two-parent household that happens to be a father and a mother kind of cling to mom until a certain age, and then they start hanging out with dad more. It just sort of happens that way. And so to me, this is one of the aspects of being close to your mom's knee, just being a mama's boy, is that you want to be like her, not really understanding anything about gender, just understanding what it's like to idolize someone and want to be like them. And it could very well be in another house that someone, dresses up with dad's shoes, but that's not met with the same reaction. And this to me was about what happens when someone innocently and feeling in their feelings and their identity at the time steps out of that definition, and what happens when they are greeted with the realization that thinking differently is okay or not okay. And that to me was really the message. And again, go back to that power dynamic, that remember when you're the adult and you're around a child, a young adult, that power dynamic is always something that's very scary to them. And your ability to show empathy and compassion, patience and understanding, and go into every single discussion with love always wins is where the win happens.
Often people will awaken, and for whatever reason, it could be the loss of a spouse, sometimes a huge event in life, the loss of a child, your house burns down. And not always, it doesn't always have to be something external like that. It can just be an internal process. But that rediscovery, that recognition of who you truly are, part of what you realize is that you've never not been that. You've always been that. You've just forgotten it. And as soon as you remember, it's a non-conceptual knowing. You just know it because you are it. You become it. That's how you know it. You know it by remembering it and becoming it. I mean, that's how we know anything. But in this case, it's that knowing that just emerges, and you may never even try to then go back and figure out what happened. You just know that now you're awake and before you were asleep, and you don't feel the need to tell anyone. If it's an authentic awakening, it's very popular today for people to, they have a realization and right away they want to go and tell everyone what that realization was. And there is an impulse to do that. Because when you discover some kind of truth about life, you want to share it with other people because that truth is important to know. But for the purpose of spiritual progress, it's sort of better to keep that stuff to yourself. Even though I wrote a whole book about my own journey, for your own development, it's better to just keep it until it's really integrated. Once it's integrated, tell whoever needs to hear it at the appropriate time.
Dance has such a huge impact on my life because being able to explore, even as someone who went into dance considered late, I've had so many wonderful experiences through my career as a dance artist in performing, in sharing through my teaching, through choreographing, through the creative lens, because like physiotherapy and like all professions, dance has a lot of different pockets of places that you can kind of direct your energy towards. And I've had the real amazing experiences in all of those areas. So it's been a fantastic journey. And now being 56 years old, how do I redefine what dance is in a body that doesn't quite do the things it used to do? But that's an interesting part of the puzzle. And like we're talking about that through, some of my clients, I think all human beings are always kind of evaluating and redefining who it is and where we are at that time within the body that we have. And so, like, is this still enjoyable to me? Is this still something that gives me pleasure? Is this still something I want to do? Or is it just something that's hard for me to do? And I still love teaching. I still love choreographing. And if you give me a chance, I'd still love to be on stage. So, yeah.
I have a huge affinity with dogs, and I know what dogs are doing for my mental health, and I know what dogs are doing for my time on this earth. God knows I've no belief in any form of religion or any crap like that. No respect to anybody. I just have no belief in it whatsoever. I believe that there's a massive creator who made us, and whoever made dog spelt it backwards. It's God, D-O-G, or whatever it is. Okay? Something amazing. Believe me, I'm going to wake up out of the coffin and there's going to be God on all fours chatting to me, wagging his tail. And I'm going to go, boy, I knew it was you. You know what I mean? And I'm going to say, what a laugh. Suffer little dogs, come on to me. I'm telling you, there's something about it. But I think that we're going to have to bring dogs, especially in as legal companion animals, and give them a new legal status. By giving them a legal status, I think what we'll do is, look how many humans are battered by humans in the world and very little happens to them. But at least if you're caught killing a human, you get life in prison or you get something. If we could put more legality on dogs as companion animals and start that status off, of course, non-animal people think this is crazy because where will that stop? Will cattle become companion animals? And possibly, I don't know, probably not my time, but I'd love to see dogs giving some new legal status in companion animals, or you as a human can identify an animal as your companion animal, and that animal gets new rights.
Justice is a pretty funny thing. Like, everybody has their own idea of justice. Like, is it punishment? Is it the person being found guilty and then there being some kind of retribution or punishment? None of those things really work that well. So I don't know. It's sort of a weird for me to think this, but I worked in the criminal justice system for a long, long time. But my idea of justice is very different now than it was then. Then you worked in a system. I worked in a system, and you played by the rules, and you put a case forward and the jury either found them guilty or not guilty, but there are rules to follow. There's the game to be played. I'm a long time out of that system, like almost 14 years now. I've been retired. I don't see justice the same way anymore. And so when you say, do I feel like I've got justice? I think it's more peace of mind. Like writing the book for me was a form of justice. Doing it in another name, that was protective of myself. Doing the audio thing now in my own name, in my own voice, that feels like justice. Doing this interview with you, that feels very real. That feels very just. It feels very important. People choosing to read my book, that would be a form of justice for me. Like people thinking about their own lives and how they're living and where they come from and what their culture is. And that would be great. So my idea of justice has changed a lot. And like I say, now I feel more like it's peace of mind, being a bit more content with who I am. It sort of doesn't have much to do with what's going on around me anymore or what people do to me anymore. It's got to do with what I do to myself. It's who I am. It's how I behave. It's how I live my life. It's got very little to do with what other people do anymore.
My life's journey has just been ironic from the start. My last name's Power, and I think the whole thing has been this search for power. That's what I've been looking for. And my mistake, and I still make it, is to think that I have to have it, that I do it all, that I'm the person that has to wield and make and control and manifest and make things happen, all based on my own strength and ability and intelligence or whatever, or sometimes just the willfulness of my brain. And then to find, well, no, in fact, all that stuff's completely useless. And it might have been the reason you ended up here. And now to say, okay, well, what's this thing? And then for me, it was like, yeah, that idea that I had, this concept that I had, that there could be this force out there and it actually cares about me and actually likes me. And it might be trying to help me. And then it's kind of moving into this like sort of humility place where you're like, well, maybe I'll let it. what do they say you should do? Like, so what do I do? And then there's other people like me who've been through and they say, well, here's what I did. And then you try some of that. Some of it you're like, well, that's totally crap. That's silly. But it worked for you. That's cool. And, you find your own way. But basically it was like, yeah, they say in recovery sometimes with alcohol, especially, that they call it spirits for a reason. You were looking for something from that. And what you were looking for was a spiritual experience.
So when I see scientific explanations like Einstein's theory that light is always both wave and particle, which for a long time quantum physicists could not prove. Light in their experiments was always switching back and forth, behaving as a wave or behaving as a particle. And finally, in 2017, scientists, quantum physicists, the first group in Italy, actually proved that light is all the time both wave and particle. And I just love that scientific theory because it goes so exactly with my own experience that we are always both wave and particle. We are essentially light. And so the fact that we're particles, we're bodies all differentiated and all different and have all of these attributes where we move around in space and age and die and so on. None of that takes away from the fact that we are also wave. We are also pure energy. We are light. And that one does not mean that the other is not already present. So it's not, to me, as though we have to wait till some time when we're disembodied to experience being spirit. We are always that right at the same time as we are embodied.
There's two other things that I think sit alongside isolation, and that's shame and stigma. And those things can often all combine to further impact someone's sense of isolation. So isolation can definitely come when a person using violence starts to control who someone might see, or says, I don't like that person, or we shouldn't be with, or physically moves to another place with them. So it might be geographical isolation, social isolation, less time with the family. This person a lot of queer people don't necessarily automatically have good relationships, or may have experienced trans or bi or homophobia from their family, so they may be not in a space where they're supported already. And that isolation can compound a sense of self and a sense of how big their world is. Someone's world is controlled and shrunk down to basically the person using violence is their main person in their world and is kind of at the center of the climate of their world and the people they interact with or don't. It makes seeing other opportunities and accessing other opportunities for support really, really difficult.
I was getting to a point where I was noticing my discomfort whenever people I would meet would ask, what do you do? And since I wasn't working, I didn't really know how to respond. And so for the first time in my life, I didn't know how to describe myself to people without the work I was doing. I wasn't teaching mindfulness anymore. I was just doing my rehab. And so I remember sitting on my bed. I had these big sliding doors facing the mountains in North Van, and thankfully had a practice of being aware of discomfort and having an opening to be curious about what it was. And so I went and got my journal and I just started writing. And I remember crying and crying and crying, and just feeling into the discomfort. And then there was an aha moment. And that aha moment was, my love for myself is conditional. And it was so sad. And I was so angry at myself because I had only been loving myself because of what I do, how much I do. And now that I wasn't doing work, quote unquote work, income work, I didn't know how to love myself. And so I wrote another contract in those moments with the mountains as my witness, that my love for myself thereon would be unconditional, no matter what I do and don't do.
What I try to do is, I have a very busy job. We are 240 students. We have a staff of 30. I would say from 6 in the morning until maybe 5 in the evening, I'm constantly interested in other people and how they're faring and their well-being and their education. So you're constantly giving all the time. And what you do is you put yourself in second place there. But what I have learned is that there does come a point where you need to park your work at a certain time and you need to look after yourself, because an engine can't run on an empty tank. You know, in leading a school and leading a staff and leading the children, you need to be in the whole of all of your health, your physical health, your emotional health, your well-being. And I think what I've learned is that's why it is important for me to go on these hiking trips. It is that moment where I just have that time to myself to recalibrate, to appreciate all is around me, to re-energize myself. So it's kind of the resilience to allow yourself, to give yourself permission to take time for yourself. And that is important. I think sometimes we're not very good at that. I think we think maybe there's a selfishness to it, but I do think it's not at all being selfish at all. I think it's important that you need to know when you've reached your limit. You need to have a little bit of time for yourself, re-energize yourself. And with that, Jen, you re-energize others, and then you can continue in the role that you have in your professional life.
As you evolve again, like you're not the same person. I can talk personally, I guess, even ending my marriage, that was part of my identity of who I was with, being married. That was part of my identity. And so I had to realize that was no longer who I was. So being okay with that and being able to say, okay, well, now who am I going to be? You can look at it positively as well. This is time to, recreate. What can I recreate here? And again, this all takes time. It's not an overnight thing, but it can be a time of excitement as well. You start to build a new life that aligns with you more than your previous life. You can look at your values and your aspirations and just looking for, that joy and fulfillment. And then you'll have new activities, new relationships, and you'll build your confidence. And so that's something to look forward to as well.
I can only speak for me, but for me, it was very important to not let the bad thing define me. And I really wanted to focus on, okay, I have cancer. We're going to do a lot of things to treat the cancer, and hopefully they work. But I want to focus on, how do I not let cancer thrive in my body? How do I make sure that cancer can't thrive in my body beyond this, beyond all of the toxic treatments that my body is going to go through, and the cutting and the burning, and, which are real treatments that most people that have cancer experience. We don't know why I have it. Maybe never going to know that answer. And so I can't focus on the why. I have to focus on how to prevent it. That was my approach. I also had a number of other very close friends whose partners were diagnosed with cancer in the pandemic as well. And some of them had very different paths, and some of them had very different outlooks. And it's so personal. I think it's really easy for people to say, you're going to beat this, or look at that person that has that positive outlook. Why can't you have that positive outlook? And I think everybody has to go through their own journey, because I didn't always feel positive. It wasn't like every day I woke up feeling positive. People do need to process things in their own way, and you can't compare one person to another person.
The real struggle, I was so occupied with Ben and my other two kids that I felt like I was working overtime every day anyway, and it was valuable work. But then when Ben was more settled and, was in his middle school, high school years, I really needed to find something that was just for me. And that's when I got into real estate, because it was flexible and I could set my own hours and I could respond to Ben if he needed, and my other kids, of course, as well. But going back to work, I think a lot of women experience this if they did stay home with their kids for any reason. Going back to work or getting into the workforce again it's a transition, and it's difficult sometimes because you do have that gap in your employment record. It's a big gaping hole on your resume, and you always have to explain why. And, I wasn't sitting around eating, chocolates and watching TV for 10 years. You know what I mean? So why we have to explain it, I don't know. But that was kind of hard. And trying to find a new identity, right? Because career is really integral to our identities. And so that was hard too. I think it can impact our sense of self-worth when we don't have that title to define us. But I am long over that.
I think this is the idea of where suffering comes in. You know, there's this sort of existential threat, almost an existential crisis, a loss of meaning, a loss of sense of self. Like, just things aren't making sense anymore. Things aren't working anymore. There's that sort of dragging feeling of angst or even dread going to work. And I think also, you know, that the idea of, you know, to introduce the term moral injury comes in as well. That sense of like you're wanting to do the job that you're trained for, and you're feeling that you're just not able to do it for a host of different reasons. And in this instance of sort of the pandemic, it was really around the demand outstripping resources. And I think that people's needs had really skyrocketed and sort of mushroomed and over those months, and the sense of support networks and social cohesion that we had was just completely outstripped. So any sense of coping that people might have had was then removed. And so I think they looked to professional bodies or societal systems to try and make up for that. And I think a lot of us as healthcare professionals felt that weight. And so the drive for me was really one of, how do I restore a sense of integrity and restore a sense of balance to my life that allows me to live and function in the world without this sense of moral injury or moral residue, and be able to do so in a way that is in alignment with my values, with alignment with my intentions. You know, I think the process of change is really around whether you can, you know, do you change your external environment or do you change your inner landscape? And often it's a combination of both, perhaps, or one leads to the other.
I think it's in my blood. Although my father was born in Latvia, my mom is daughter of Latvians, my blood really officially should be Latvian blood. But because I was born in Brazil, I can feel the syncopation, I can feel the rhythm, I can sense, it's not only in my mind, in my ears, in my fingers, it's in my body, right, in my whole body. And that's why I decided, you know what, this is what makes me the most comfortable, the most confident, and the happiest. So since then, and it has been, I don't know, at least more than 20 years, that's what I have been doing. I play mostly Brazilian music. I also play other types, other genres, other periods of music, but I think I am myself the most when I play Brazilian music.
Honesty. We have to be completely honest with who we are and why we do the things that we do, or some things about ourselves we can like, and other things about ourselves we may not like. And if we can do something about that, then fine. And if we can't, we have to accept that that's who we are, warts and all. Spiritually, it's not all about sitting there and meditating, you know. It's about being responsible for your own behavior and how we interact with others, being kind to other people, being kind to animals, respecting nature. I think it's really important that we do all of these things and do things to the best of our ability, to be spiritually aware of other people's feelings, including the animal kingdom, you know, and just to respect all living things, really.
Part 2: The Real and Metaphorical Mountains We Climb. This is another important theme that emerged from Season 2. Our path through life is often rocky, with a mixture of happiness and suffering. Mountains rise to great heights from the very foundation of the earth, adding to their mystery and majesty, just like our birth into the world and our rapid growth and steady climb to achieve various milestones. Some parts of the ascent are easier than others, but in both cases we are gifted with the opportunity to witness breathtaking vistas and see how far we've traveled. We might clamber over treacherous stretches of jagged rock and reach impossible altitudes where the air is thin, that challenge our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And sometimes we might get caught by a surprise avalanche that forces us to the very bottom only to start climbing all over again. This is the journey of life, full of beauty, challenges, pitfalls, and triumphs along the way, until such time that we arrive at our final summit. Let's listen in.
You know how corporates work. If there's a person and you really want to get that person to get the job, and that person is asking way more than what they are supposed to give for a certain job, it happens. They will hire the person. They will. It just happens. And also, when a company says we don't have this budget or we don't have it, 9 out of 10 times it's not true. If they really want you with a certain set of skills, and maybe there's like not enough of people with your skills and your talents at that point of time, yeah, they're gonna pay more. So I also understand sort of like where it comes from. And some people negotiate really well. And then on the other hand, it's really hard to compare people. Really, so that's interesting. That's why it also makes, even though you do the same job, you have the same degree, you have the same amount of experience, maybe on paper you have the same responsibilities, but what are your day-to-day tasks? Are they really the same? Or think about your role within the business. Maybe you're the one who always organizes the parties. Maybe you're the one where everybody goes to when shit hits the fan. Those are also important things that are taken into account sometimes. And that's where you see also a difference in pay. So I even understand that there is a difference. Only, of course, it's strange that you really see this huge difference between men and women. But what you were saying, like, yeah, a lot of men, white, gray men, they hold the positions of power. And who are they going to promote? People who look like them. That's why it's so important, if you are a junior, that you see people who are like you. So you think, hey, if they can reach that top, and it's my ambition to reach that top, I think I can do it too.
That first experience that someone has where they step outside of, well, they don't know they're stepping outside of a norm when they're doing that. But in the innocence of doing that, if the answer is judgment, if the answer is stigma, if the answer is even sometimes, violence, where a child gets, that first beating, where they remember, don't do that again, that's when you start to hide, and that's when you start to code switch and mask and not be your authentic self. If I can share with you, I showed the book to a friend of mine who's gay, and he actually started crying, and he said, this is exactly what happened to me. He said, I should have written this book. And I said, first of all, why you didn't write this book is because what happened was so traumatic, because your family didn't support you. And he said, I was 5, and I had a little sister, and I put on my mother's shoes and her hat and her shawl, and I picked up my little sister like I was the mom, and I hugged her to me, and I walked around, and I got the beating of my life. And, I never did that again. And he hid his sexual orientation to his family and left as soon as he could. And I said, and that's why you didn't write the story, because it was a horrible experience. If someone had just said, what are you thinking about? What are you doing? Explain to me what you're questioning. What's going on? Totally different interaction, totally different level of a feeling of belonging and trust. So I wanted this book and this story to normalize that this is the way it should be.
There's a force at work that is pushing for awakening, that's always been pushing for awakening, and that sometimes does lead to a great explosion and a great awakening. It may not necessarily look spiritual, but there have been periods in the history of the planet where these awakenings happen. They happen in our own lifetime as well. So a bigger awakening is just a much more global realization happening. I don't know that there's going to be one central voice, but I think that it's sort of happening all over the planet, and eventually it will come to pass. I believe it will. But, I don't like making predictions. I don't like that I got the prediction that it's going to happen in my lifetime, because what if it doesn't? That's it. But that's the information that was given to me. And even though I'm apprehensive about sharing it because I'm not someone to make predictions, I think it's important for us to take responsibility for our lives and not sit around and wait for something to happen because it's supposed to happen. I can definitely see that it's happening. Before a revolution happens, nobody thinks anything's going on, but then you realize when you look back that all of these forces were at play. And then, the historians then go and they put together the pieces and they're like, oh, that's why the Berlin Wall fell at that exact moment. But you don't see what's happening before the actual moment, before the chrysalis cracks open and the butterfly emerges. And you just know something's going on, but you're not quite sure what changes are afoot. All kinds of shifts are taking place in human consciousness that are supporting an awakening.
In the world of medicine and, standard medicine, and, even like with the word wellness, it's very often about healing, getting better, learning how to walk again, getting function back. But the human body doesn't always work that way. And so I guess for me, trying to help, depending on the injury, someone to find success or to thrive or celebrate the achievement of a goal, even if that goal means that they didn't cross a barrier into this place that society feels is called healing. So if I have a client, say, who has had a spinal cord injury and they can't use their legs again, and they come to me and they want to learn to walk, and that's not maybe in the cards, maybe they get to a point where they can stand at their kitchen sink and wash the dishes, but they spend most of their time in a wheelchair. How do I, and how do myself and the client redefine success and redefine betterment so that we're not kind of always going, well, I didn't walk or I didn't get better. But in actual fact, they achieved a sense of a new lifestyle that is pretty admirable. Because I've had some clients who've had pretty catastrophic injuries, and then they go off and they live these really incredibly rich and fulfilling lives because they've gone through this sense of catastrophe. And so for me, when I observe them get to that other side, they've found a tremendous amount of success because they've been really, really challenged. So did they get walking again, or did they regain full function? Maybe not, but maybe they went off and had a really full life of being a person in a wheelchair. So I guess my concern about defining mindset and success is really also a journey. It's not a game where there's a beginning, middle, and end.
We get no help from government. Per year, we get a small grant of, 20, 22, 23 grand from national government because we're a registered charity. But, we have to do everything to keep informed, to make sure our charity is perfect and untouchable, and to keep that small bit of money coming in from government and to keep the government on board with you. But the government as such do nothing. Myself and Jerome, my husband, were involved in raising nearly 700,000 with my fellow volunteers for Dundalk Dog Rescue on a street for 5 years. And we raised nearly $750,000. And this is the love of dogs from our town. They adore dogs in Dundalk. And they adore us. They love what we're doing. And we ended up building probably one of the most amazing independent centres run by volunteers in Ireland, apart from Dogs Trust. We're battling everything here in Ireland. We're known as the puppy farm of Europe.
It's really interesting, Fabio, that this phase of my life, I sit here and I think awful things happened. But then it's sort of like, well, if that hadn't happened, then that wouldn't have happened. Like even my accident that caused my knee injury that got me into, like, that was an awful thing. But if that hadn't happened, I don't know if I would have gotten interested in going to law school. Law school was awful. I hated it. But if I hadn't gone through law school, I wouldn't have become a lawyer and been able to do all that good work. So it's almost like at this perspective, I can look back at like, well, that's good. No, that's bad. Well, no, that's good. Well, no, that's bad. So it's sort of like, it's like getting the bigger picture. It feels like in some weird kind of way, it all makes sense. And so I'm really grateful that at this phase of my life, I can look back with very few regrets, feel like I've lived a pretty good life, and I'm grateful for it all. Like I say, if I hadn't had that family, I wouldn't have had the training ground to become the lawyer I did. So, yeah, it feels good to be at a time in my life where I feel grateful.
I've worked and talked with other people who are struggling with drugs and alcohol, and almost immediately you know whether they're ready to get better by how bad their bottom is. And they're kind of circling the toilet bowl, but they haven't fully flushed yet. And you can spend years in that place, and I did. But when you get to that soul crushing, and again, I deal in paradoxes quite a bit. The paradox is when you're completely beaten, that's when everything turns around. Like that's exactly the moment where everything starts to turn around. And that was my experience with it. If I have to say what was it, it was faith. For me, there was a bunch of things that I looked for in alcohol and drugs. Peace of mind, feeling good about myself, calmness, relaxation, maybe, I guess confidence, and also this sense of connection. And I got it from alcohol and drugs. I really did. And it gave me that for many years, and then it didn't.
I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to exert again without feeling ill. And we went to see various doctors and so on. And I was advised that I should try to do a couple of minutes a day on a recumbent bicycle and see if I could build up the minutes without becoming nauseous and headache and so on. And if I was able to do even a little bit of exertion. And for weeks and weeks, I couldn't. And I was ready to give up and just realized that this was all beyond me. When I remembered this statement that Dr. Mills had said to me years and years ago when I was being very serious and earnest and wanting to do the right thing, and he said, "Oh, rejoice in the ever newness of being. This is great fun." And I thought, being is ever new. The ever newness of being is actually happening right now. And if being can be ever new, then my experience can change and it will restore. And it just gave me the confidence to keep going. And gradually I found that I could. And I just kept going back to that idea. And also the statement that the body is where rhythm and harmony and perfection reside. And I just held to those statements over and over again. And I also gave myself a program for my own study and meditation. So I used Jon Kabat-Zinn's wonderful book, The Full Catastrophe, to do inner body scans and meditations and so on, lying in bed. And then I started listening to music and I started reading. And I just used all of the words and music and these declarations to build within myself enough of a force of presence that I could start to feel like I could be whole again.
I wanted to circle back to a question you said around why might there be high instances. And I think one of the things that's important to think about and know is what drives violence and gendered violence. Like, what are the drivers? What we know from overwhelmingly from research is that there's drivers around gender inequality and gender roles. And in particular, the concept of gender often sits in a binary concept, which is male and female, man and woman. And when we think about patriarchy and the impacts of a giant systematic system that preferences one gender to hold power over another gender. And I'm talking very broadly, and there's institutions and laws and lots of changes that have happened, but this still continues in many, many places and in many ways, and often in more subtle ways than we think. One of the things that I wanted to perhaps let people know about is there's been more kind of research done around what might that be for LGBTQI people who've experienced, what might be driving some of the intimate partner violence there. And there's lots of different, there's different thoughts around this, but research that's been really, I think, illuminating in Australia is from Rainbow Health Australia. And a couple of years ago, they did a kind of a broad literature review around the world, and they've published a report called Pride in Prevention, if anyone wants to look at that, and looks at how this same idea around gender roles and gender norms and holding, one gender holding power over another continues to contribute to the ways that people experience violence in queer community and in queer relationships as well. And then there's the role of colonisation on top of that, and thinking about how has that impacted and continues to impact the harm.
Yeah, climbing, what some call the chief, came with so many insights. One, that climbing is therapeutic, climbing is functional rehab. Two, I learned that nature really loves me, because there are times when I thought I was going to give up, that I just had no more places to be able to get grounding contact on each step. And I swear it felt like pieces of the rock were coming out for me to step on to keep going up. It was unbelievable. I was like, what is going on? I feel like this mountain is lifting me up and giving me new steps to go up. Like, it was really unbelievable. And so when I got to the top of that mountain, not only was those two insights the beginning of what is now Canadian Adaptive Climbing Society's therapeutic climbing program, which just finished its 14th season, but that top of the mountain insight was just another validation of how there is spirit in what we think is just a tree or a blade of grass, but there really is a relationship of love and support.
Well, it's a challenge I love. I actually love it. And also I love the fact that you know that you are going to be in mountains non-stop for 10 days or 15 days or more. You're going to get up in the mountains. You're going to walk in the mountains. You're going to sleep in the mountains. And you're going to do it again and again and again. And at no stage do I ever tire of that. I just love that moment where you kind of come in the evening, you arrive in a hut, you find wherever you're going to sleep, you sit down with your beer or with the people that are there, and you just look at the mountains and the wonderful sunset. And then then first thing in the morning when sun comes up, you can go out and you're surrounded by these mountains again. So I think that it's that lovely extended break away from all your work and all the worries that you have in the world. And it's just this vastness in front of you of these, this beautiful scenery, this beautiful nature. And it's just a privilege to be able to do it and to be able to see it.
Empowerment, how I see it, is when we make decisions in life, when we're at a higher place on the emotional scale. I often talk about the scale because the lower emotions, which you should not be making decisions in, are shame, guilt, apathy, victimhood, grief, fear. That's not an empowered place to be making good decisions. And I often feel like I talk about these lower emotions and it seems like a kind of downer, but the fact is, you can't change what you're not willing to see. So to get to the empowerment level, you have to clean up those lower emotions and why you're there and why you keep going back there and what's going on and the stories you're telling yourself. And as you rise up, then you are able to be in that place of empowerment. And that's the place that, you have more energy. You're able to, again, make good decisions. Your relationships are stronger. And it's not that you're going to be there all the time. It's just that you want to be there more often than not.
We went through all the emotions, as you can imagine. I didn't know this, and maybe this isn't the same for every cancer, but you also don't really know staging until you have pathology, and like pretty advanced pathology. The biopsy was not going to give us the full staging. So, people would ask, like, well, what stage is it? And you're like, I don't know. And I'm actually not going to maybe know until, in my case, I have a mastectomy. Like, that's really real. And that was going to be months and months away. You go through the whole range of, am I going to die? What if I die? What does that mean for our family? You end up having a lot of moments of crying, hopefully some moments of laughter, and also really deep conversations, I think, that most people don't have. Thankfully, they don't have to have. But I think for Leanne and I, that made us stronger, and it made us really have a moment of, where do we want to be? What do we want to be doing? How do we want to be living our life? And that extended throughout the journey. It wasn't all at the beginning, but at the beginning, it was a lot of emotions. And then you have to tell people. There's a lot of shitty feelings, to be honest, at the beginning. And I think part of it is because you just don't know what's next.
You know, we had no idea what the outcome was going to be. We had no idea if Ben would ever be able to walk or to sit or to crawl or anything. It started with sitting. And I remember, just if we take sitting, for example, I did OT with him every day, multiple times a day. And I would have to force him. I was taught by an occupational therapist how to maneuver his body so that he would learn that muscle memory to get himself into a sitting position. And that took months. That's just one example, but every milestone required that sort of intensive, regular support. But then when he would do it, it was like earth-shattering. I remember we had rented a cottage with my family, and Ben, I think, was almost a year old, and he wasn't walking yet, and he wasn't pulling up on anything yet. And all of a sudden, Ben pulled himself up onto a chair and actually took a step along this chair, holding onto this chair. And I could burst into tears right now. I burst into tears. We all did, because we thought, oh my God, this kid is going to walk. He's going to actually do it. And then we had a fabulous OT who worked with Ben and me to get him to be able to walk. And she was relentless and beautiful and fun. And I still send her a Christmas card with an update on him every year. He wouldn't have walked without her, I don't think. But I remember the days when he would wibble wobble across the living room floor. It was unreal, the joy. It was unreal. So there are some real gifts along the way in this journey.
You know, often we will see in medicine, we'll see death as a failure, or at least a problem to be solved, an issue to be avoided at all costs. And in a lot of circumstances, absolutely. There's a lot that we can do to help someone in a very life-threatening situation, be that through addressing some sort of traumatic accident or treating an overwhelming infection or any of those things. But also, there is a point where all of us will have to die, and we're all going to have to die of something. A lot of the time, medicine, I think at the moment, is prolonging life in terms of the quantity of days that we might have, but not in terms of the quality that we're experiencing that. And that, I think, is an individual choice. Like you get to choose, or you should get to choose, do I want treatment for this or that? But it should be an informed choice also of, is that going to benefit me in terms of my motivations and intentions? And I think that's where I enjoy those kind of conversations, really, of saying, what's important to you?
I had a very hard childhood. My father passed away when I was 7 years old. I then had, in a matter of a year, my mom got married to my stepfather, who adopted us. We had to move from our house, and everything turned upside down all of a sudden. Meanwhile, I kept playing the piano. Well, I was 16, my older brother passed away, and I had to play at his funeral, which was also super hard. I didn't have much money, so my childhood was definitely not, I would say, enjoyable. I really did not enjoy it. I had lots of great things happening, but also lots of hardships. Meanwhile, I was always playing the piano, which I think helped me survive and helped me actually get through everything. I still was told by my family, or especially by my uncle, that I should do computer science in college as a profession, because as a musician I would not survive. And I tried. The first year I was always an A student, but that year I failed a class in computer science. So I said, you know what, this is not for me. I should go back to what I always loved to do. In fact, an angel came to my life. That's my aunt, who's now 93 years old. And she was the one who said, is that what you want, to do computer science? And I said, no. So what do you like? I said, I like to play the piano. So she said, okay, quit. I will pay for your books for piano, for your music books, and you are going to do what you like. And since then, it's just like what happens in life normally when we think that we are doing the right thing, but of course everything goes against us. This time I decided, okay, I'll turn completely to a completely different direction, 180 degrees, and now I'm going to follow music. And since then, everything started going right.
If you know you've got that support system in place, it makes you stronger, whether it's your bloodline family or your friends who are your family, even work colleagues can be, we've got lots of different little tribes that we connect to that give us that support system that we hopefully should give in return. So, the give and take is really important. So that makes, I think, you resilient. Life's experiences make you resilient. I don't think there's ever such thing as a mistake. They are learning curves as we go through life. And that is where the resilience comes in, through those learning experiences. Another quote, I can't remember who said this. Great ships can stay safe in a harbour, but that's not what they're built for. They are built for adventure, and life is an adventure that we should absolutely enjoy.
Thank you to all of my guests in Season 2. Meryl Fondewelden, Debra Williams, Stephen D'Amico, Darryl Tracy, Bobby Wayne, Donna Armstrong, Mike Power, Lucille Joseph, Belinda Bannerman, Jasa Sulit, Noel Scully, Charlene Beaumont, Nancy Horvath, Heather Harris, Dave Bradley, Paulu Steinberg, and Jackie Dennison. As always, thank you, my listeners, for tuning in and for your ongoing support. Thank you for listening to The Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. The Stumbling Spirit podcast is produced and hosted by me, Fabio da Silva Fernandez, and Resting Bell Wellness, Inc. Royalty-free music is provided by Pixabay GmbH. If you wish, you can follow and DM me on Instagram at The Stumbling Spirit. Until next time, take a deep breath and another step forward on your path of resilience.